shots. Like you have two horizontal lines that divide your screen into 3 horizontal sections, and then you slice that twice, so you have a grid of 9.
Yeah.
And I guess just basically positioning significant elements in one of those 9 points is just apparently just something that people believe about photography.
Yeah. Something more pleasing that's been discovered.
Yeah, that it's just, maybe it's something to do with also the way like your eye or your brain processes like information visually, is that like you have something that's straight ahead of you, and then you have things that are outside of your field of vision, and then you have kind of like a cardinal break-even point in terms of locating elements. Like, so you have, because you kind of have like 3 distinct fields of view. Like you have like what your right eye can see, what your left eye can see, and then the overlap that both eyes can see.
Yeah.
So your vision, in a sense, is already partitioned into 3 fundamental regions. So yeah, maybe it reflects that.
It is so shady and like enclosed.
Yeah, it's like we're in a
field
dome
right now.
Huge difference from the last in-person pod, which was 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, we're in this tree dome.
Back to the home base.
Yeah. After many adventures on both sides.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Oh, yes. Let me just pour my not coffee.
2 kids. And with us,
I tremble.
Yes.
Cheers.
Cheers. And with us come the...
Oh, Jesus God, there's more. It's just the beginning.
It never ends. At this point, we're just being stubborn and stupid. I was thinking before you were coming this morning that we can do Upper Park.
Oh, because of the van?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have the van, and the van can be a backdrop too.
Dude, yeah, let's do the next pod over at like somewhere up the Yahi, or not Yahi. Yeah, Yahi Trail, right?
We don't have to have the van in the shot, but the van in the shot means like the road right next to and above Yahi that like hits Bear Hole.
Yeah.
And then goes past it to Salmon Hole.
That's what I'm talking about, yeah. The road along Yahi,
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be sick. Only thing is that road's a little bit rough.
Yeah,
So,
we would find out how far along it the van could even go.
that van, if you hit, like, it just rattles. Like, you hit, like, a pothole and it goes, like, like, you think it's going to just, like, shake apart or something.
Okay, so that's, like, the whole road.
Yeah, I know.
That's
so
the whole Upper Park
we might
road.
be able to do it, especially if we get out there in the morning. Even just the parking lot at Horseshoe Lake, I feel like, would be a dope place.
Fuck yeah.
Or even...
Overlooking the lake.
Yeah, or having, like, a shot of just that big, beautiful field in the background. The field that's kind of, like, between...
Well, it just got controlled burned just now.
Oh, it did?
I mean, maybe that'll make it even cooler.
A moonscape.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Blackened moonscape.
They controlled burned it, huh?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I guess that's an idea.
But yeah, Upper Park next week.
Yeah, let's do it.
Sick.
If I'm still in Chico.
Yes.
I anticipate that I will be.
Yes. The 30th is a Sunday that if you're here, Jade's next salon
Dope.
will be occurring.
Yeah. So have you guys have been doing that every couple weeks? Mm-hmm. How's it been going?
Really great.
So what was the
awesome.
last, because I think I missed the topic. How does one, the first one that I missed, what was the topic on that one again?
The first one you missed was fear.
Right.
Fear itself.
Okay.
And that was really good.
Yeah, but that does sound like a good one.
It was pretty uncomfortable, but like we were, as a unit, we were equipped to make a productive conversation out of the triggering subject matter.
What was is it worth repeating?
Just fear was the triggering subject matter. And
But like obviously there were specific
Yeah, like everyone obviously had the
Say what you're afraid
opportunity
of.
to, explore what they were
God,
afraid of.
that is uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Even thinking about that
Wow.
makes me think that I'm afraid of fear. I am, dude. Everyone's afraid of fear.
I'm not sure I am at this point. Not compared to before, though. I have a very active, conscious relationship with my fear at this point. We're buds. And after that, the topic was taking off on my rants about romanticism and idealism.
Okay, good. Standard fare.
And Jade's prompt was, where's the place of tragedy in the dramatic and literature sense? Is there a valid place for tragedy in our arts and culture?
I'll bet you probably had a unexpected take on that, because the obvious thing is that, of course, there is, but I can imagine you saying that there isn't, based on our previous discussions about movies that have to have a sad ending. You feel is perhaps an overused trope in literature and film.
Now it is, for fucking sure.
But does that amount to I'm not sure, I guess I'm assuming, does that amount to like a general, in general, do you think, well, I guess I'm asking is what is your opinion on this? Instead of trying to just guess at it.
I've been thinking, I thought about it randomly a week later in terms of Romeo and Juliet. And is it really necessary that it ends that way? Isn't that a little, overly gothic? To have them just fucking kill themselves? Aren't we supposed to feel, wonderful about young love? And shouldn't it be a wonderful ending?
I think it's like a question of just the territory exists. There is tragedy in life. Mm-hmm. There's people's experiences that are kind of like Romeo and Juliet. And I think that if Romeo and Juliet wasn't made, then there would be a place in the culture for a film to do that, because it resonates with a particular subset of people's experiences. And
sure.
I think that it's a question of whether or not cultural trends kind of make you focus on one thing at the expense of another, irrespective of whether or not they map to the human experience. I feel like the human, if there's a region that hasn't been explored yet, it's going to create a large pressure for art to go do that.
Especially if it's a poignant part of human experience, and tragedy is.
Yeah,
so
I would say necessarily.
So
yes.
If you never create dramatic pieces exploring that, there's going to be a mounting pressure for drama and literature to explore that.
Yeah, because there's a weird silence about it.
Yeah, because everyone understands that they're losing loved ones and stuff, and it hurts.
Yeah, exactly.
I guess one of the things I came away with at that salon was that it's a part of reality, but there's a more generative, it doesn't do to make it the central determining factor of art or life. Making idealism and romanticism the distinguishing factor of your life makes room for tragedy to be included, because that just makes the fulfillment of values at the end even more monumental. And tragedy still gets a full expression within that umbrella setting of the tone. Whereas tragedy being put at the center as the tone-setting thing of the whole thing, there's no room for romanticism. Romanticism is only another thing to get brutally destroyed.
So it's a question of, so you're saying that, I think you're saying that...
Is there a place for tragedy? Yes. Is it right to have it be in the central place? Absolutely not.
Right. So I understood that correctly. I agree with you. I wonder, though, do you think that tragedy and romanticism are inherently antagonistic, or would a focus on any other thing, like making any other thing arbitrarily the center, would that be equally as ill-advised? Like, for instance, like you can imagine a culture where like some sort of other social thing like honorifics or, like worshiping the local deity or something, or like focusing on sexy women or like whatever other things have seized media culture from time to time. Do you think that any of those could... or like would be just as bad to just focus on those at the expense of everything else, or do you think there's something unique about tragedy that we should never focus on it?
I think life naturally brings you to focus on tragedy in natural rhythms.
So perhaps tragedy is the least necessary to intentionally focus on?
No, that was a way of me saying that there are times to intentionally focus on it.
Yeah, okay.
As far as, are they inherently antagonistic to each other, I think I just said that in a way that it depends on what's in the center focus. Romanticism makes room for other things if it's at the center.
I see.
And it's not inherently antagonistic. Tragedy at the center makes it inherently antagonistic to have romanticism included under it.
So there's a kind of quality of openness or generativeness that is specific to various ideals.
There are generative ideals, and there are limiting ideals.
Yeah, so there's a generative limiting axis that you can use to characterize ideals.
And decide what to act on in terms of thoughts and principles.
So that kind of seems to indicate that ideals have not only a specific content, but also kind of a character.
And they create a world. Every principle or ideal, creates a world. If you follow it through, this is the world it creates.
Yeah, so using tragedy as an example, if you talk about what the content of a tragedy is, it's an emotional experience, but there has a certain character that it also implies, like a certain statement of values by focusing on it.
It's a worldview.
Yeah.
It's a set of beliefs about what reality inherently is.
Like wearing a clown hat every day is a fashion statement about what kind of person you are.
Sure.
Aside from the experience of wearing a clown hat. It's like, yeah, that's true. That's why I fucking hate Tim Burton. No offense to Tim Burton, but I fucking hate them.
Yeah?
Not him. I don't know the guy. But his movies, I don't know, his aesthetic. I just really hate it. I hate it. There's something, it's...
What's the movie most emblematic of your hatred of him?
Probably like Corpse Bride or
that one
disgusting.
Sucks.
I hate it. It makes me sad even thinking about it. And then what's that other one? Nightmare Before Christmas or whatever. That was him, right?
Uh-huh.
I don't know. I just don't like it.
I love Tim Burton.
God.
I grew up with his
God,
films.
no.
I mean, he sucks balls now.
Thank you.
He hasn't made a good film in fucking decades. But Batman with Michael Keaton and Jack Nicholson.
I haven't seen that one.
And Batman Returns with Michael Keaton and Danny DeVito and Michelle Pfeiffer.
Okay, you know what it is? I don't like his animation style. That's my only criticism.
And Beetlejuice
with
Michael Keaton.
I don't like Beetlejuice either. I hate Beetlejuice.
What? I fucking love
something
Beetlejuice.
about that aesthetic. I don't like it. It's like...
It's hands-on. It's fucking made. Makes your skin crawl a little bit. It's like stop motion.
It's distasteful. I mean, I can appreciate it as art, and it's definitely high quality, but it's just, yeah, I just have a negative emotional reaction to it, which is valuable, but I try to avoid it. I think it's like the visual equivalent of, there's something melancholy about it that
Yes, there definitely
I can't
is.
put my finger on. I don't like it.
Well, melancholy was a huge flavor of most of my life. I was drawn to Tim Burton movies as a kid, was drawn to darker music.
God, why don't you just move to Scandinavia, Alex? You're like the exact, you'd fit like a glove in that society.
Before I might have.
Certain aspects, I'm just saying, like metal, the appreciation of melancholy, and just generally looking.
But see, they put the tragedy at the center. It
Not always. Not always. Only in winter. And in the summer, they repress it. And in the winter, they repress their joy. And in the summer, they repress their melancholy. And that's why the spring and fall are times of mania, because they represent like a wind rushing in as the air masses.
The witching hour.
Is that what the witching hour is?
At night, like the like imperceptible shift from one day to another.
Oh yeah, is that what it is? Isn't it like the witching hour is when everyone is asleep, basically? Like 3 a.m. or something?
It seems like a transition point from one day to another where chaos can enter in.
Yeah, like a little seam.
Like the key word that triggered me was chaos.
Chaos, yeah.
When you were talking about the mixing of one polarity of season with another.
Yeah. And it's like a rushing wind, sort of. It's like when the sun sets and starts becoming fucking windy and your lighter doesn't work anymore.
Yeah.
And you're trying to light a camp stove and it's not fucking working.
Well, I have high hopes in this shady tree dome for being able to light our cigarettes this morning.
As do I.
It seems to be breaking the wind pretty wonderfully.
Yes, even though it's windy here in general.
I had a thought about these different forms of literature and like the tragedy, the comedy, romanticism, slash idealism.
Yeah.
And in terms of quality of art, certainly tragedies can and often have reached the highest realms of art quality and human achievement. And one of the determining factors there is inner coherence.
Interesting.
Like, if it's united in its parts, and if its different parts are all integrated to the theme, that theme can be tragic and still be fucking beautiful and a stable art structure that is just wonderfully made.
I see where this is going.
It's when you arbitrarily mix the fucking parts to subvert expectations that you get this abortion beast of a art piece.
Yeah, I think we talked about this several pods ago.
I'm sure we have.
Where, yeah, like you were expressing your disdain for, I think, one particular example of some movie that decided to just kill the hero at the end for no fucking reason.
It was romanticism through and through. The whole movie.
What was the
up
example?
To the last
What was that
10
example?
minutes. I have 2 examples.
Okay.
And I watched them both in the same week. And it, like, emotionally destroyed me. Because it was 2 of the best examples of modern romanticism I'd ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
Both of them in the last 10 minutes just murdered their dream. Completely arbitrarily, completely against the whole theme of every scene of the movie up to that point.
I can't believe I can't remember what this example was now.
Well, the first one was Ford v. Ferrari.
That's not the one.
About building cars and motive power in general and innovation. And the second one was La La Land.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what it was.
The musical and romance and love and falling in love and choosing your dreams, following through on your dreams. and they just aren't together at the end. And they totally, like, masterfully weave together the tragedy that's been weaved through the whole La La Land story in the last, like, 10 minutes. In the last 20 minutes, they use the last 10 minutes to perfectly integrate every mistake and every tragic incident into the romantic vision of love heals everything. Like, all of this is healed because I love you and you love me, and now life begins.
And then it's just...
And then the next 10 minutes is, but no. Life isn't like that. Life is a tragedy, and so these people aren't together. Even though we just put some of the most monumental cinematic work imaginable into making it work just now, 30 seconds ago, we're now going to murder that.
You know, it just shows that they value not alienating certain people more than they value paying respect to others. Like...
They're murdering their unborn dreams by doing that. Catering to weaklings' vision of what life is murdering every unborn dream of someone who sees that movie and understands that they have an ideal to work towards now. And their tragedies in their own life. Like, a movie is supposed to give you a guiding light of, like, this is an ideal. It's not reality, it's hyper-reality. It's a platonic form. So the movie is taking all those dreams and then fucking saying, you can try your best to mold your life to an ideal, and life is just gonna fucking shoot you in the kneecaps. And it's just a complete misunderstanding of what Romanticism is and what its function is, what its practical function in terms of providing a service to the human spirit is supposed to do. The director had no conscious articulation of that, and so defaulted on determinism in the end.
And you think that they don't appreciate what Romanticism really is. They've cheapened it into something that is meant to make the audience feel a certain way.
They don't think Romanticism is meant for reality.
Yeah. So it's kind of like an indulgence.
It's this eccentric indulgence the director was humoring his inner child with.
It's like a lollipop that you just... And then and it ends, and then you go back to your normal life.
Yeah, because nothing really changed in your life at the end of the day. Because art can't really do that.
Okay, actually, you've convinced me to hate this.
It's hateful.
That's a good argument.
It's hateful.
Thank you for convincing me to hate something. No,
it's worse than It's worse than Disney Star Wars, because you don't expect anything but corruption from that, and so that's what you get. But this is a guy who touched the sun and then decided to murder all the children of inspiration that came from his loins by touching the sun of inspiration.
Maybe he didn't. Maybe he ended up at the end. Maybe the reason he demurred was because he was afraid people would be jealous of him touching the sun.
That's a fear most people have, yeah. He talked about it in interviews as if that was his vision the entire time, was to show a real-life love story.
Fuck you, dude.
I know.
Fuck that,
I know.
Man. That's so... God. Man.
It's just so played and so trite. Like, really? We haven't seen that before?
You're not doing anyone any favors. Here's the thing. You want someone... Okay. A person who's suffering can't be trusted to know what's good for them. I think you need... that's what I believe, is I think that if you're fucked up in the head and you're down, you don't need people to make you feel better about being down. You need people to help you not be down.
Yeah, and show you an up experience.
Or at least try.
Yes.
Or something. if you go around, okay, if there's something, see, if you're someone who has something and you're trying to help out someone who doesn't have something, whether or not it's a good idea to focus on making them feel better, what you choose about that carries an implication about what you believe with regard to that person's capacity to ever get out of where they're at. Mm-hmm. Like, if you underestimate people, then you're going to feel the need to go around making excuses for them. And because that person's fucked up and doesn't know what's good for them, they're going to be all too happy to just take the excuses that you, as a healthy person, are giving this person who isn't.
Yeah.
And it's like, the risk of making art that challenges people is perhaps this: you're exposing yourself to the risk of alienation, but you need to be willing to do that.
Well, it's like, I'm reaching a little bit right here. Like, the light of God is not meant to be a comfortable experience.
You know what else is not a comfortable experience? The fact that Ryan Gosling blinks at a rate that is just unnatural. And also the blinks are more drawn out. I think an average person's blink is about 10 milliseconds. His is about an order of magnitude. He goes... and then he kind of like squeezes his eyelids shut.
Well, that's like half his script in most of his movies, is when he blinks and how long he blinks.
Yeah. And that's why he's this, like, I don't know what it is. It's like a butterfly, like flapping its wings at you, that makes girls like him.
I love him.
Nothing against Ryan Gosling. Ryan Gosling's great. It's he blinks in a way that is identified with himself as an actor. It's fantastic.
He learned to play piano for that role, and both him and Emma Stone learned to dance for that role.
It's pretty romantic.
And it's some fucking good piano playing, dog, and some really good fucking dance numbers. Oh man. I can see, if I'm gonna like make excuses for this director, I don't know if I should even, but I can put myself in his shoes and see that he had this experience of being in love, and the act of following his career and her following her career drew them apart.
That's a
at the end of
charitable
the day.
explanation.
And so he had a spiritual need to get that out of his system and objectify it so that he could understand what happened to him.
You know, if that's really his reason, then I completely respect that 100%.
And if that's the case, then it was him flexing romanticism to a bigger degree than he'd ever flexed it before, to even make the movie and show it in all its unspoken moments of ineffable beauty that happened between those two people.
Yeah, on a level, on a meta level.
And he got as far as he could, maybe. And ideally, he would then do better next time.
Do better.
He fucking should do better. He murdered his fucking film. He literally touched the sun of a timeless piece of art that will actually fucking last. And now it won't last. Now it'll just be another Ozymandian kingdom buried in the sand.
Ozymandian? Wizard of Oz?
Ozymandias is a king in a poem. Look upon ye mighty works and despair. Is one of the key phrases of this short poem about a traveler finding ruins buried in sand in the desert.
I've heard of this. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
And contemplating the mighty works of that time that did not suspect 100 years thence would be buried and lost.
The ephemeral nature of it all. How the mighty have fallen. All of these stones will be reduced to nothing.
Apparently. My attitude is you just need to do better. Straight up. Do better.
I hate that phrase, though. I hate
better?
the phrase, do better.
Well, it's a SJW corrupted phrase at this point.
The only thing is when someone says do better, I just think I mentally translate it to I'm better.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So you can just replace the word do with I'm, and that's probably why I hate it.
Yeah, and that's when, like, the people who have the most problem with the way I talk mainly respond to hearing me say that instead of what I'm actually saying. Like, when they react angrily to, like, rants, like, my last 15 minutes on this episode, they're like, you're just saying you're better than that artist. And, like, you're not. And fair enough, I'm not. But I will be.
Well, I also think that it's possible to criticize things without needing, like, I don't think moral authority is necessary for criticism. I think that...
Yeah, you see things in front of you and you call them as you see them.
You can simultaneously criticize something, well, okay, which isn't just, it's just another way of saying you can criticize yourself.
Yeah.
You can say that person is an asshole. You might be an asshole. You might be a self-aware asshole.
That doesn't change your perception.
It doesn't change the fact, like,
yes.
And in fact, some of the greatest camaraderie is born out of those situations.
Sure.
Where a group of people can mutually accept a flaw that they all share. There's something... Yeah, I think that if you are maybe on that level of art, you probably appreciate criticism. I think people who would get offended by criticism are like people who are insecure.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a healthy chance that this director would take it really well if I met him and told him how I feel about La La Land.
Yeah.
There's a very solid chance he would completely understand.
And you'd probably learn something too.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be a great conversation no matter what. I have every...
If I managed to avoid strangling him.
You wouldn't strangle him. You'd have a great conversation.
It would start very harsh. Let's say that. But the harshness would be directly fueled by my sight of greatness in him.
It's like eating a warhead candy. Starts off really fucking harsh, and then eventually you get down to the sweet, benign center.
Yeah, yeah.
That's why what I always used to do was just wash off the candies in the sink. You know why?
Fucking pussy.
I'm a practical man.
That's not meta-practical though, because you're eating a warhead to overcome difficulty.
I was a child, okay? Don't hold me to too high of a standard. It explains a lot about my life.
My most intense encounters with adversity are fucking eating a warhead. Oh, jeez.
That's true privilege.
Yeah. I guess football also is one of the most direct encounters with adversity growing up. And being bad boys and when we could get away with it when there weren't any yard duties out and doing tackle football.
Our life is physically too accommodating. We live in a human zoo of our own construction. We're the self-domesticated ape. We have a need to smash the shit out of each other
yes.
and regress to our animalistic forebears.
We played Smear the Queer.
God damn it. Dude, we can't say this on... No, man, this is... All right. Well, that rolls out YouTube as a venue for this podcast.
We played Smear the Queer when we were in...
You know what's funny?
3rd grade or so, and it was purely just tackle the shit out of each other. Whoever has the ball gets tackled.
Alex, I too, when I was a child. Actually, now that I'm going back in memory banks, I remember Smear the Queer.
Yeah.
Also,
we all remember it.
Also,
we all remember it.
I was in middle school. Man, I was in middle school in 2000 and mid 2000s. That was when everything was gay.
Oh yeah.
Everything was gay.
Yep.
Your mom.
Yep.
And retarded.
Yep.
And like, there's a small, like, sort of like homophobic inner child in me that's just like gay. Everything is gay, man. That's gay. But you know what? The truth is, I didn't know what it meant. I didn't even know any gay people back then. There wasn't as many gay people who were out of the closet, and Obama didn't even support fucking gay marriage. So if Obama didn't support it, and I was a fucking he's a full-grown man. He should have supported the gay people before it was cool. Don't hold my third grade self to a high standard, okay? I was just parroting what the conservative authority figures in my life said at that point in life, okay? And yeah.
I think you're defending yourself a little too much right now.
Hey, you can never be too careful.
We all played Smear the Queer.
Hey.
It's fine.
If Twitter hears about the fact that my third grade self played Smear the Queer, I'm going to get canceled.
I mean, I had to play it and then find out, like, 3 months later what a queer even was. You know what I mean?
Well, what's funny about it is that football, just by itself, is pretty fucking gay.
Yes.
Like, it's one of the gayest things that straight guys are into.
Yeah.
And, I mean, you know, slap each other in the ass.
That's part of why it's fucking
Dude,
awesome. It's so great to tackle each other and wrestle.
And you slap each other in the ass when you're wearing those tight little football pants. And you fucking snap each other with a towel when you're taking a shower. And it's just fucking gay. But, so it makes complete sense why you had to smear the queer. Because you were getting a little too afraid of that you were...
You have to repress.
The queer was about, and so you had to repress the queer a little bit, lest it get out of hand. Like, I remember in middle school, there was this guy who, me and my brother were at the same school, and he was, this was like, Chico Christian, so you have to understand the cultural context. He was just
some strong repressive.
It was pretty repressed, and like we were like in 8th grade, and this guy he just for some reason like started talking ironically one day in like a really like he just started talking like this, like he had like this huge lisp, like it was like super exaggerated, and like he was pioneering that kind of like ambiguously gay hipster accent before it was even a thing. And then we, being like fucking 8th graders, were like, so gay, bro. And he was like, I'm not gay. Turns out he was fucking gay. Because I met him later on. Yeah. He was in community college, and I met him again, and he was like, then like openly just fucking gay. And I was like, oh, like it's sad that when you were a kid, you know, you probably, I don't know if he felt, I hope he didn't like, I don't know how much that affected him, because like back then, but that shows you how strongly gay he was, that even when he couldn't be gay,
he was acting it out.
He had to be ironically gay.
He was acting it out before he even probably understood it.
Exactly. He was acting it out because he found that ironic voice to just feel like who he was.
More natural.
Exactly. Yeah. Or something like that. And us being little like asshat fuckwad 8th graders were like, everything was gay to us. Like even things that were inanimate objects were gay. So like we were probably also being little lightning rods for like the large scale cultural processing that was going on, where like full grown adults like Obama were fucking deciding what they felt about this or what was acceptable to say. And so the children are just unconscious expressions of the things that adults are not allowed to articulate.
Very well put.
So
kids often are playing out the issues being debated behind closed doors by the adults.
Yeah, the fucking the dysfunctional repressed adults use their children as proxies.
That's right.
To talk to be like
to hash things out.
Yeah, and that's why like dude, teens these days, like Gen Z, they're like a fucking politicized generation, because we're a politicized society, because we have a politicized media, and it trickles down onto 7th graders who are now like oh, that boy is a Biden supporter. I don't like him. Like, what the fuck? Since when did 7th graders need to think about that? Like, it's a kind of like, we're not doing a lot of, like, we should really be protecting, I feel like Democrats and Republicans should come up with like a mutual deal. Kind of like how like the Axis and the Allies, or like maybe not the Axis and Allies, but like in World War I, like the fucking Germans and the English had an armistice. You know what I mean? For Christmas.
That's right.
Maybe the Republicans and Democrats could have like an armistice where it's like...
Until kids reach a certain age.
Yeah, to be like, you know what? Just let's have it socially be like in a way that like, if you have a 13-year-old, just try to avoid politics in your house and don't encourage them to like self-select their friend group based on weird shit that they don't even understand yet. You wouldn't sexualize kids. You wouldn't be like, oh, you're 12 years old now? Hey, let me take you to the store and we can start buying makeup and a bra. Like, don't do that. Well, let people figure that out on their own, you know?
People were still doing that, like, in a more racist America. People were sorting their kids very aggressively sometimes by race.
Well, not just parents, but like schools too, like actual institutions.
So it's been happening for a while to force kids to take stands that they aren't qualified to make judgments about.
Yeah.
In my growing up era, when we called everything gay and called everything retarded, and called each other gay, it was clear when the line gets crossed, though. Because, like, I think also of the word fag in that same era. I got called a fag all the time. And that, like...
Well, yeah, you're a musician, so naturally you're a fag.
Yeah, and a weird, like, goth kid. Dyeing my hair crazy colors and stuff. So... there was a clear line that got crossed into hate speech, quote unquote. Like,
isn't like half the things 7th graders say to each other? Well, probably not nowadays. Maybe kids are nicer now.
90% of the time, all the politically incorrect stuff going on was completely well-intentioned, and kids playing with kids. And you could fucking tell when it was over that line and aimed to hurt. And based in hatred.
Yeah.
And you could fucking tell, and it wasn't okay.
I don't think
like, even kids understood. I understood that as a kid.
Kids are not natural sources of hatred. They don't come with hatred pre-installed. They come with fear pre-installed, and biologically.
And cruelty.
Cruelty.
Like, you see cruelty come up of itself.
I think that cruelty, as immortalized by Pink Floyd's famous song. You know which one I'm referring to.
No, I don't.
Okay, maybe there's several Pink Floyd songs that might. Brick in the Wall or another Brick in the Wall. Yeah, so he's like, there's like that background chattering that's like, where all the kids are laughing at him and like the teacher's encouraging it. Like that right there, I think is kind of speaks to that. About how like adults are fucking psychologically unhealthy, and I think that a lot of the, like beating up the nerd is like, some of that is like just like the blatant tribalism of humans that hasn't been yet like integrated. And but like it tends to express itself along the line, the existing fracture lines of society that are like, the repressed shit that adults still deal with, and still is in comedy, and still is in political fighting, and so I don't know. I think there's a balance. I don't think you should completely isolate children from politics, but like, maybe I think in specific terms, politics doesn't need to be introduced to children, because you can't, even a lot of adults don't think about politics in general enough terms.
Yeah.
Like arguing about welfare is not really politics. It's more of a statement of your general attitude towards things. Like, political issues are the proxies by which we negotiate the various insecurities, values, and like priorities that we have. And that's why, I mean, I think you can see it really playing out in spades currently, that politics has been, or at least political discourse, politics is still probably, I'm sure it's still happening behind closed doors, but political discourse has been reduced to the level of like basically psychotherapy, where we're just engaging in a mass psychotherapy session. I think I've said this before, where we're just, headlines are just little tokens of virtue currency.
Yeah.
And it goes for liberals and conservatives, and we are just like, we're almost like crows collecting shiny beads. Like, some crows collect and they decorate their nest with red things, and some crows decorate their nest with blue things, I suppose.
Yep.
And then there's like the original OG black crows, the anarchist crows, which are, crows are black. Actually, crow's the best bird. Crow's the most anarchist open source bird that there is.
That's true.
They collect things, they're smart, they're wily, they're independent.
Tool using.
They don't give a fuck. They sit there and just go, ah! They don't sit there and go on and on and on and on. And no.
They just give you one concise middle finger.
One is enough. Yeah, it's just like, that's what a crow is. And if you fuck with it, it just, it doesn't tolerate you, but it also doesn't demand anything of you. It's doing its own fucking thing.
It's the cat of the bird kingdom.
It is. It is the cat of the bird. No, it is. Absolutely.
Well, we've said that same thing about hawks too.
Yeah, I think. Well, I've heard it actually. I saw a meme where it was basically was putting forth the idea that owls are actually
the cats.
The cats. Which, I mean, to be fair, owls are also very, very cat-like. They hunt mice.
Well, that's just the raptor family in general.
I think it's just
are all cats of bird
or maybe
kingdom.
just rodent predators, basically.
Yeah.
Like, they cough up hairballs. They eat mice. They can rotate their heads to an unnatural degree.
They like the night.
They like the night. They have really expressive eyes.
Independent,
and just like fluffy and just, yeah.
I got to piss.
All right.
One of my prompts was, what responsibility do you have for helping the disenfranchised as a person, as Stuart, helping the disempowered? Do you have a responsibility towards them at all? And I bring it up because of the last couple salons that you missed. And we had a few straight up leftists sitting in the last two salons, and it was the first two salons that had that overtly ideological slant being injected into the conversation at regular intervals.
Nice.
And that was a recurring tendency, was to basically write off everything we were discussing to, or like minimize it or belittle the issues we were discussing, to point out how privileged we were, because there's people right now who don't even get to sit in a comfortable room with friends and talk about things. Yeah. So we should sit and think about that right now instead of what we're talking about.
I mean, it's basically like the thing, like that old, one of the OG memes of that nature was like there's starving children in Africa, bro. Enjoy your steak, you know what I mean?
That's right.
It's like, well, I think that's kind of like something like, well, you know, we all I don't know if it's anyone's fault in particular that everything isn't equally distributed. Like, if I live in like a place in the world where it just rains constantly and there isn't a water shortage and I flush my toilet, am I supposed to feel bad because people who live in a desert don't have water? Like, I mean, or people, maybe that's a bad example because it's kind of just like not anyone's fault that there's different amounts of water in different parts of the world, but I think that it's kind of like, I mean, the only reason I think I'm against that way of going about things is because it is kind of defeatist in a way that basically says that it makes all problems less solvable when you have to discuss every problem in terms of the biggest problem in the world, which is the fact that there's unfairness, inequality, injustice. Like, every possible, there's such a thing as sub-problems in the world that actually might be more tractable, and that if you have privilege, you can use that privilege in a way that helps people too, or at least doesn't harm people. Like, I don't know, I think guilt, to the extent that it raises your consciousness, which is possible, I think. Guilt is not always bad. Guilt can have a clarifying, illuminating effect sometimes, but I think there's a certain point at which recognition of privilege extends to apology or guilt for privilege, even when you didn't choose where you were born. Like, you didn't choose where you were born just as much as anyone else who was born in a poor place. I don't know.
Well,
that's my first pass reaction to this.
There's your first pass, and so now I'll repeat the question. Do you have a responsibility, personally, for helping the disempowered and the disenfranchised?
Yes, I do. I think I do. I think it is nested within a more general responsibility I have to do the best with what I've been given. And that doesn't, for myself, that does include helping people. I have to figure out, another aspect of the responsibility is figuring out what is the most practically effective way to do that. And I think that cutting off my nose to spite my face is not an effective approach, because then I won't have a nose and I'll be fucking marred and no one will like me, whatever, that's a stupid example, but like...
So it's less, in their language, it's not that extreme, but in my opinion, that's what it amounts to, is cutting your nose off your face.
Yeah, so I think that, like, martyrdom is bullshit.
But, like, the contention here is, this medium that you and I have created, because it exists, you and I are automatically obligated to discuss the things the leftist zeitgeist thinks we should discuss. We are obligated, according to that worldview, to be discussing the plight of the black man. And because now it's 2021 and we're supposed to talk about Asian people next, to talk about the plight of the Asian people. And to...
What about fucking Latinos?
And to...
They haven't had their moment yet, but they will. Wait. Yeah.
And because we're here able to talk and able to have food in our bellies, we are obligated to fess up to our inherent racism on camera. And if we're not doing that, then we aren't using our privilege in a just way. That's the implication whenever these things are brought up, in my opinion.
Well, I guess that what I would take issue with is that I don't know if all those things are really, like, I think it's something else masquerading as leftism. I think that leftism, at least let's just say objectively from a historical perspective, was founded on the idea of material progress. Like take a look at the rhetoric. I mean, take a look at the flag of the Soviet Union. It was a hammer and a sickle. that is not a symbol that's like, it's explicitly focused on labor. Like, the idea of like a chicken in every home. Like, they were talking about like chicken. That was the original, at least like the modern formulation of leftism, I think, began with as a reactionary movement to the material inequality created by industrial capitalism in the 19th century. So that is a historical reaction to that. And I think that what's happened is that even though global capitalism has created tremendous inequality and it's created tremendous environmental destruction, a side effect is that it has provided material progress, if you want to call it that. It's made life materially easier for vast numbers of people. Now, probably it's made it psychologically more difficult in many ways. I'm not saying it's a good thing or a bad thing per se, for the purposes of this argument. I'm saying that what has happened is that it's caused leftism as an ideology, as a media construct or as a cultural construct, to have to retreat backward into identity politics to explain why people are still oppressed. And I don't think that is good for the original goals of leftism. And you see someone like Bernie Sanders or like the modern, what's sometimes inaccurately, I think, referred to in the media as the extreme left. Like, as you see these people, there is a segment of American leftism that is attempting to return to the material motivations. And not coincidentally, that's where the most dynamic, interesting stuff, whether you'd agree with it or not, is happening on the left. I think that the kind of leftism that is trotted out and is megaphone projected through universities and corporate HR departments and stuff is like a kind of sham leftism that is designed to distract people from being able to coherently frame their position about what they want to happen. And
it's very disempowering.
It's disempowering, and I think it's designed to be disempowering because people, like that whole thing of every time you sit down to discuss any issue, it has to be like intersectionalized to the point that it's the size of the fucking known universe, and therefore no progress can be made. And that's exactly what Walmart or Target wants to happen, which is why they brand all of their corporate PR now with like these trivialized statements of whatever. And I don't know, it's like Bud Light slapping a rainbow flag on their can to increase sales. It's like really, actually, in a very, talk about tragedy, it's like the ultimate victory of capitalism, really, is that capitalism swatted away actual leftism, and the way it swatted it away was by installing, like I'm thinking of the Jodorowsky film Holy Mountain, where Jesus gets murdered, and then they put him in a crucifix, plaster cast, and they put him on top of the Roman structure, and then everyone's like, Christianity won! And the Romans are like, you got us, guys. Like, I think that's what happened, is that the corporate establishment basically just was like, oh, leftism, nice. Here's your ideology for you. We packaged it up real nice.
Yep.
You don't have to think. And it's part of the defense mechanism of this kind of like corporate culture. It doesn't even deserve to be called leftism. Like, look, I would like to sit down, if I could sit down and have, I don't know what the fuck Lenin drinks. I'm just going to assume he drinks scotch because he's a fucking dictator. If I could sit down with Vladimir Lenin and have drink some scotch and have a cigar with that dude. I mean, he's a mass murderer, but I think he'd probably have something interesting to say. He might be who knows? I mean, that dude probably was an intellectual.
I'm not sure I would personally seek out that conversation. If it came upon me, I would be present for it with open eyes, but I wouldn't seek it out.
I think it'd be a fascinating conversation.
So, by the same token, you would have that conversation with Hitler as well.
Yeah.
See, I don't think I would volunteer for that in either case, but by example in my own life, I would be there. If it happened to me, I would sit there with open eyes and have a real back and forth.
Even like what about like Hitler in 1938 when he was on the cover of Time magazine? And if you were
That's the same Hitler, and it's the same answer.
Well, a lot of people probably had a conversation with him. Probably a lot of people who a few years later were on the opposite side of the war.
Yep.
I bet they learned something. I don't think you... I mean, I guess the distinction I see between the Hitlers and Lenins of the world, Stalins and Maos, and people now who, I guess, are identifying as leftists or what have you. I'm not saying Hitler was leftist, but Stalin, Mao, and Lenin certainly were. People who were... I think people just like ideology nowadays. I think I was saying this before, but like, I don't know if I really believe people when they tell me that they're like a thing. Like, I'm a leftist.
Well,
like, okay.
It's not able to be believed, like, because it's not able to be actually acted on.
I'm not sure what anyone really means when they say that. I'd have to sit down with you and be like, what are your issues and what do you think should be done about them? If you don't have...
And what are you actually personally doing? That has to be part of the conversation.
Well, I would settle for a realistic argument about what could be done. If you even have a coherent strategy for saying, like, if you're...
I'm not sure that even is, like... If it's not informed somehow by the way they're living their lives, then that's not a real conversation you're having.
It makes it a little bit suspicious because it makes you... Although, I think there's a certain... You can advocate for a position without believing it.
Yeah, but that just seems like so inefficient.
It is inefficient, but I'm just saying, even from the perspective of just a purely academic discussion, if somebody... Like, I want to know that you've thought through things.
Sure.
And I want to know what are the metrics you're using to determine what you think are the good solutions and the bad solutions. Because if all you can bring to the table is you should feel bad, then I don't really want to talk to you. If you want to bring something to the table like, I think this is the most important thing, and I disagree with you, well, that's an infinitely better conversation, because even if I don't agree that maybe, for example, like, should everyone be equal or should people have maximum opportunity? Because everyone being equal and people having maximum opportunity are not the same. There's a certain kind of mutual exclusivity that exists. There's a certain tension between those two things. But might be some people in the world that just think at the end of the day, it is better for everyone to be equal. I don't happen to agree with that. I think there needs to be a balance. But even if I found someone who was hardline, like, we should redistribute all wealth, I could go, okay, well, I can respect you, at least if I think that you have if you have a plan in mind about what should be done. That's what can translate to politics. Like, if you said, I think everyone should be equal, and I have a system in mind that would accomplish that without letting a dictator immediately assume control. Like, for example, if you said, like, I believe in the dreams of the Soviet Union, I just think they went about it wrong, which is why it collapsed. I have an idea of how to run the Soviet Union that would actually arguably resist, could accomplish the goals of, like, Marx or Lenin. I would be like, I'm interested to hear that. I might actually learn something. There's content. Might disagree with you, but there's a chance that you might give me some insight. Whereas, even if it's only insight about why I believe my position more strongly or something like that, which is fine. But if you're just someone who's like, well, we can't talk about that yet. Let's just talk about what we're personally doing to make sure that we're good and that we're blameless and pure and, like, clothed in white. Like, it's just boring. It's like I don't want to go to church.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to just show up at the church of your ideology and listen to a sermon. Fuck that. No, it's just boring. Like, it really should just be called church. Like, there's a reason why church is limited to once a week. It's a special place you go for people who go to church.
In my experience, these ideologues are the people least capable of thinking. So, in principle, I feel the same way. In experience so far, those are the least interesting, least generative conversations I've ever had. What are you looking for?
I'm searching for my cigarette that fell somewhere.
Okay, I'm ready.
I'm ready. I already smoked.
So you're going to ask me a question?
Yeah, the same question. The same one you posed to me. Do we have a responsibility to the downtrodden?
Us. We?
You. A person in general. I suppose that your answer will be general in the sense that, like, you're out, like, what does a person, or maybe not, maybe you specifically.
I think it's the most useful to make it a specific personal question.
Really?
That's how I asked you, because I think that, yeah.
Yeah, but I answered it in general terms. I think it's more useful to think of it in general terms because you can kind of create like theories should be as general as possible.
But it starts with actual embodied, like, what you can do. Like, that's how I think anyway, do I think I have a responsibility towards the disempowered and the disenfranchised? No, definitely not. I have a responsibility to fulfill my own values and to live the best life possible and to make good on the gift of free will that I've been given.
Do you think you have a responsibility to avoid all harm to others?
That's impossible, so no. That's an impossible goal to achieve.
Do you think that, let's supposing as a thought experiment, you could you found money on the ground. That's a bad example. Let's suppose that you were down on your luck and a bunch of people were down on their luck and you all needed handouts and there was only a certain amount to go around. Or let's make it even more extreme. You're all trapped on a lifeboat. There's only so much water. Someone's not going to get enough. Do you have a responsibility to forego drinking the water that might save your life so that someone else can drink it?
No. If there's someone in this hypothetical situation that embodies my own highest values more than me and will literally achieve my mission in the world better than I could ever, then yeah, I would let my life get subsumed in their survival.
Interesting. That's a great answer.
Besides that, I would fight and kill to stay alive.
So you are you're kind of identifying the you in this question with your highest values. And that your body and your mind is kind of like an agent in the quest to actualize those values. And in those extreme hypothetical scenario.
Well, first of all, that would never happen.
Well, of course not, but it's hypothetical.
Second of all, I would never meet someone that was literally more me than myself. So I wouldn't do that because it just 99% of the time, it would only be me that could fulfill my own highest values.
So you're saying for the practical purposes of accomplishing your values, you might as well just assume that you personally are best equipped to embody them.
And I would fight to stay alive.
I think the truth is we'd all fight to stay alive.
And people don't want to face that truth when they espouse this leftist stuff. And that's just not reality, man. That's just not what nature does. And we are in nature.
We are of nature. And in nature.
And the specific question, do I have any responsibility personally towards the downtrodden? No. Because I can't control what they do with any help I give them. I can only make myself a healthier, more generative individual. That's the only thing I have an actual stable amount of control over. I don't think anyone can really help another person. I don't think anyone can really hurt another person.
Really?
That is something between you and you, if you help yourself or if you hurt yourself. And a person once on the path of life and once decided to live will literally go through 9 hells of infinite suffering and come out the other side stronger because they've decided to live. And conversely, a person who's decided to die and rot can take an infinite amount of help and still remain unchanged and still decide to die. And no one can make the decision to help themselves or not except that person. So the best you can do is model health. That's the best you can do for another person. It's their own choice if they want to be helped by you or not.
What about your family?
So the best thing I can do for other people is to model health and fulfillment.
So what if it's your own kids or something like that? Is that
your own kids? That's
they're an extension of you.
They're an extension of you,
yeah.
And that's a creative project, and that falls into the realm of creative projects, where I don't think you should engage in a creative project unless you're willing to lay your life down.
Yeah.
To make it.
I think that's one of the I think that's getting at what is probably my biggest objection to like those kind of highly abstract forms of collectivism, that it kind of tends to wipe away other institutions like family groups, tribal groups, community groups, neighborhoods.
It incentivizes, to use Larry Elder's words, it incentivizes you to marry the state.
Yes.
Instead of marry someone you're in love with.
Right, and I think that's psychologically destructive because human beings are not suited to living in abstract communities. We're suited to living in flesh and blood communities. Yeah,
based on real values that you share with real people.
And real experiences.
Yes.
Yeah. I think that's completely valid. I don't know. I think that the way I look at this is, maybe I guess just to go off of this again, is that like if you are really living your best life, you're gonna have an overflowing of love to give to other people, and so it's kind of like, it just gets back to what's the most pragmatic strategy to helping.
Where does that free energy to help others come from?
It comes from inside.
How does it get generated in the first place? It comes by fulfilling your own values and putting your own life first.
You have to tend to your own fucking garden so that you'll have a surplus.
That's right.
And if you have a surplus, the definition of a surplus is that you can't even consume it all yourself, and there's just naturally leftover that that create, is the substance by which communities are created.
And then it's another separate question once you have that surplus of who's in the best position to direct where that surplus goes. The state or you?
I think neither. I think it's people who are immediately around you. People who are immediately in contact with you.
No, I don't agree with that at all.
Really?
You can certainly take their input while you make your own personal decision if they're people you trust, but the decision is still yours. It's still your property.
Yeah, but I mean something that's happening unconsciously and unintentionally. Like, for instance, if you raise a family and you are a mature, psychologically stable, responsible adult who isn't depressed and hasn't been crushed by the system and doesn't work a shitty job.
Okay.
And you fought your way out of that, and you have a nice home, and you speak to your kids nicely and with kindness, and don't like, shut the fuck up, and drink my Bud Light and like watch football because I hate my boss, and like I'm just all wrapped up in my own shit and I don't got anything for you. Like,
Okay,
I should have fucking worn a condom. Now I have this kid. He's another mouth to feed.
Okay, so not that, but a stable, a family rearing individual.
Or just whatever. Even if it's not the most picture perfect thing, you're just like a mature person. You have the emotional capacity to extend goodness to other people. Like even if they're just your kids. So you do that. You don't really know what the kid's going to do in their life. But probably they're going to do something that's in some way premised on the fact that you were nice to them when they were a kid. And you weren't just, all your energy wasn't taken up with your own shit. So like, I think that part of the process of being selfish is not holding on to all of the good things that you create, but just letting them spill everywhere and just like delegating in a sense, almost, the energy that you bring to people. Like, I don't know, I think like you can honestly have like a net gain. Like if there's a bunch of people that trust each other and they're all being as generous as possible, the sum result of those people's vibe or whatever is going to do something that none of those people could by themselves do. And I think it's
only the individual that can make the discernment of if a given gift to another is from a legitimate place of generosity and goodwill,
yes,
or a place of obligation.
I agree. No, totally. I agree with that.
And only you, as the person at the center of that decision, can discern if it's something that needs to come out of you, yes, based on love and goodwill, or if it's something dirtier than that.
Yeah, I think that individualism and collectivism can be united, but there's a distinct order in which they have to occur. There's a kind of, like, it has to start, individualism can create a successful collectivism. Like, healthy individuals can create healthy collectives.
Yes, that's the way, right, people can relate to each other.
But there's no way to create an ideal collective that was going to create healthy individuals. It just doesn't work that way.
I agree with that, yes.
Yeah, and so it's basically what it is. It's like, is it a bottom-up process or a top-down process? And if there's one thing that is quite clear, is that top-down processes aren't flexible.
Yeah.
And life demands flexibility.
Yes.
If you're going to create a specific mechanism to do one thing, like a calculator that's supposed to add, subtract, multiply, and divide numbers, well, then you can create a top-down architecture to execute that program. And it's going to be fast, efficient, and very unadaptable. But if you want to create a society that is capable of dealing with constantly changing things, the most ultimately complex system any of us can conceive, because it's the system in which we're embedded, called life, you have to start with bottom-up structures. Mm-hmm. Which then, through their surplus and through their success, create the niches where certain optimized top-down structures can survive, because they're depending on, they're subsidized by the stability of bottom-up structures. Like a squirrel, I always go back to squirrels because I don't know why a squirrel is like the prototypical animal to me, but it is. A squirrel is only suited to living in a stable environment created by the millions of other distinct organisms that are all trying to benefit themselves.
Sure.
That is
yes,
is literally a squirrel gathers hay, a squirrel gathers sticks, it lives in trees, it eats nuts. It is subsidized at every turn by the fact that various other organisms, like trees, are creating surpluses where they're just dropping nuts all over the ground.
That's right.
So that creates a life, a potential life. And yeah, you can't have an ideology that wants to basically neuter and... Is this little puppy?
We got a cute little part Bajon Frege, part poodle sort of situation right here. So, an idea for a new crypto.
Yeah, so I had this idea for a kind of cryptocurrency where, like, so the main problem, one of the main problems with cryptocurrencies is the fact that they can't process lots and lots and lots of transactions without having huge fees for each transaction. Like, that's part of the price that you pay for decentralization. So when you have a cryptocurrency like Ethereum, which is currently a proof of work currency, nodes have to compute hashes for each new block. And that takes a lot of energy, and there's only a certain number of transactions that can go into each block, and so therefore the cost to get in a transaction included in a block becomes very high as more people are trying to include transactions. There's a market for including transactions in the block, and it doesn't scale well enough to be useful for an actual payment infrastructure. And that's why cryptocurrencies have just become this investment vehicle where you buy a large amount and you wait and you hope it goes up and then you sell it all. If you can't profitably transfer small amounts of cryptocurrency, in the beginning you used to be able to. Literally, in the beginning you used to be able to pay for coffee with Bitcoin, and it was not ridiculous at all. But now, a single transaction of Bitcoin, whether or not you're transferring 1 cent worth or $1 billion worth, costs, like $100 or something, maybe even higher, something obscene.
Got it.
So, sure, if you're a hedge fund and you're buying $1 billion worth, $100 is nothing. But if you're trying to use it to pay for something, it's completely negates the ability for them to be used as currencies.
Got it.
I think that means that actually disrupting the global payment infrastructure, which is dominated by like banks and credit card companies, is still an open problem. And I think it's a question of how do you create consensus cheaply. And some currencies, like Ripple, I think, and probably a bunch of others at this point, have solved that problem kind of by just not really being that decentralized.
Okay.
And so they kind of are not exactly, I don't know if they really deserve to be called cryptocurrencies, because they have these master nodes where like they go like, instead of having every single node in the blockchain, which is millions and millions of computers, have to validate transactions, we have like a few master nodes, like a dozen or something. So like it's a structure that's like kind of like how the domain name system, the DNS system, has these root servers that are like the official sources of truth from that all the other of which addresses map to which IP addresses that all the other servers copy their information from, and it kind of creates like this downstream federation of like servers that just replicate the information they get from higher servers up the hierarchy. And the domain name system works because the root servers for each root zone, like .com, or like .ru or .is for Iceland, or whatever, the top level country codes are controlled by institutions that are in some way related to the government of that country or whatever. So that works because there's a pre-existing hierarchy geopolitically that is somewhat stable. But when a currency like these sort of not decentralized cryptocurrencies try to solve the scaling problem of transaction throughput by just assigning privileges to specific nodes, you're it's an unacceptable trade-off because it's no longer decentralized, because now anyone who wants to control the system just has to basically pull those few levers and now they control it. So what I was thinking about, like this kind of, like with satellite, one of the artifacts that's being created by satellite is a data set that is in a deterministic way, self-identifying trusted nodes by computing the breadth and diversity of support that particular people receive from others, weighted by the people who supported those people and the people who supported those people and stuff. So you have this organic data set that is identifying people who are kind of have a stake in the system. So I was thinking about, wouldn't it be kind of cool if you had a social data set that was self-organizing, that could reliably identify like a dozen people at any given point of time that were like arguably trustworthy, then you could kind of have your cake and eat it too, because you could have those nodes be responsible for validating transactions, and so you could do something like one of these hybrid centralized blockchains while getting around the thorny problem of, well, why are those nodes privileged? Is it just because, like, what relationship do those nodes have amongst each other? Are they just a cartel? Because unless you have a demonstratable, transparently operating system to create your master nodes, you have to assume from a security standpoint that they are acting as a cartel, at which points it obsoletes the entire purpose of a cryptocurrency, and you might as well just go with banks because they are a cartel. Visa, MasterCard, and Discover are a cartel. It's a structure that exists to solve this problem in the absence of better solutions. So I was just thinking about that. Wouldn't that be cool if like a social network had its own internal currency, and the people who were most trusted in the social network, according to an algorithm, were the people who made sure things were true?
So when Max was first fully installed in EOS, he was describing to me how that community worked. And now he's busy with other stuff, and seems like he's helping build new cryptocurrencies. But back then, he described 30 main nodes at the top based on a live voting system. And those people at the top are there by virtue of being stable and better, and the best people acting the best for the community. And they get so much wealth by being up there that they're incentivized to keep doing an even better and better job. But it's a live system where the next week they can be booted down to number 32 because someone else is doing a better job than them now. And so now there's a new 30 people next month. And it's this live updating kind of thing of who's the 30 top space holders. And there's some way of objectively showing the quality of work that had been built with EOS.
Yeah.
And so it was like constantly changeable, but also like stays those same people only to the extent that those people are getting better and better and better at doing their job.
Yeah, and that's a cool idea. I didn't realize that EOS had that implemented. I just wonder, I guess the question is how gameable is that voting system? That's what it comes down to.
Well, the intention, at least, with EOS, it was complete transparency. So there was no transaction that wasn't transparent of those people. Like, it's certainly written with that in mind, trying to account for that. Whether that was successful or not, or obviously EOS seems to be not successful enough in other aspects to keep climbing, but based on the way he talked about it, it seemed like that specific aspect of this had been solved.
Yeah, that's a really cool idea. I think that the United States or other countries that have their own currencies are already kind of example of that in a way, that like we elect a government that ensures deposits.
Yeah, that's the dream.
So,
that's the dream of what our democracy is.
It's just not transparent. That's the thing.
And transparency is getting instantiated in. Now what are you looking for? You lost your cigarette again?
Same exact situation. Motherfucker.
You can have mine.
Yeah? Some lucky person's gonna find multiple stubs. Thank you, Alex.
You're welcome.
Thank you for subsidizing my incompetence.
Yeah. I had maybe at the time it was a closing thought on generosity and the responsibility I have towards others, if any. And it's basically that at the moment my philosophy is working for me because I am seeing my experience be more helpful in a deeper way to more individuals than it's ever been before. I've never been this valuable to the people around me. It's a relatively small amount of people, but it's more objective than it's ever been before that the people around me are being benefited by closeness to me. And that's, I think it's directly because I've never been this selfish before and this honest before.
So do you think Jesus was full of shit?
I don't think he actually got martyred.
That's some Da Vinci Code level shit right there, man.
Yeah, I think that was a whole sham that we projected onto the Jesus story because we so deeply believe in original sin and sacrifice that we wouldn't accept the Christ story of salvation based on existing. If you exist, you're saved. All you have to do is see the fact of this individual God in man and understand that that's a metaphor for you, and now you're saved. We wouldn't accept that story of salvation without some tragedy involved.
So you think that...
So we projected tragedy on top of it. This is my intuition.
Yeah, sure. So you think that we couldn't accept it without sacrifice. We couldn't accept that we were getting something for free.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. So, I don't know. I think that sort of speaks to our insecurity because we feel like we're on probation in this world. We've done something wrong.
There's different parts of the Christian myth, and there's good parts of it to focus on and bad parts of it to focus on.
Yeah.
Mostly we focus on his sacrifice as a virtue.
We've pedestalized that.
And that is evil, and that creates evil effects. We're focusing on his death when he always meant for us to focus on his life.
So you think the idea that I really need to stop laying these cigarettes here. Jesus. Hold up. But, no. Don't worry.
Find that cigarette.
Redemption, brothers. I've been redeemed. The cigarette has arisen.
The monkey can learn.
It is risen. So Jesus, we're talking about. Yeah. So do you think that whole idea, like when I was being indoctrinated as a child about like various saints and whatnot, the theme was that like the most holy ones were the ones that had the most gruesome deaths, I don't know, whatever, some of the apostles or whatever were like, and they went on and carried the good word to the far reaches of the thing, and then eventually they were crucified by the so-and-so. And now they're forever immortalized because like somehow the fact that they like got murdered at the end just is like...
Is holy. Yeah, that's evil and wrong.
I feel like, that is kind of defeatist. Like why do you have to fucking die? Wouldn't it be,
It's completely irrational.
Yeah.
These trees give so much life to everything and everyone around them. How do they do that? Do they do that by cutting off their own limbs?
It's just dropping them on the forest floor to just be nice to the fungus. No, they're going to die no matter what.
They provide life and abundance to everything around them by selfishly grasping for more nutrients with every fucking breath that they take until they fucking die. Even fallen over, they still keep grasping for new life and new root branches.
Dude, but you know what? Biology is pretty fucking brutal, though, sometimes. I think that's what you have to accept. Like...
But it's the only way for life to fucking exist.
I was reading this kind of terrifying thing about bed bugs. The way that bed bugs reproduce, apparently, is that the male violently rips open the abdomen of the female and implants his sperm. And then the female, like, a lot of times dies as a result of that. But sometimes she doesn't, and they just evolved in a way that the most successful males are the ones that are just can do that. Like, that fucking sucks. You know what I mean? Like,
well, that sucks if we were never given free will, and so we're never able to see that way of mating and decide to create a better way. As we have.
But if we evolved in that way, we wouldn't have much of a choice. That's the thing. Until we had, like, I don't know.
That's the role of humanity. Like, nature is not finished. There is a realm where it's being self-consciousized and self-adjusted by a free will, rational mind. That's the level of the human mind.
Like, if we can have heaven if we manage to make it.
Yes. Yes.
That's true.
Nature is a starting point, and we are meant to make it better.
Yeah. See, I agree with you there. That's the right attitude, I think.
And you make it better. One way you make it better is by seeing what works out here and modeling your life after that, not by fucking killing yourself.
Well, so maybe you could say, like, our role is to improve things, not to apologize for them.
Yeah.
Well, and you know, I mean, actually, that's why a lot of religions, I mean, at least I guess just Christianity I can speak to, is like, there's even a word like apologism, like Christian apologetics.
Yeah.
It's in the word. It's like, it's rationalization, really. It's like saying, like, this is why we're living, it's almost like Pangloss and Voltaire's stories, like, this is the best of all possible worlds. You know, oh, don't you worry about all these things. This is the way the world is, and it's proceeded directly from a state of nature to the present civilization. This is the only way it could have happened, and this is why it's fine. Don't try to change things. You have to accept things like that. You know, he was a kind of a satirical character because he's full of shit. Okay. We're not living in the best of all possible worlds. Why would you, we're living in the best of all possible worlds now, at this point, because this is the only reality that exists, but you can't know how things are going to change.
You can certainly see how things can be better.
Yeah.
Like, you can always see, like, a better ideal with what you see in front of you.
Yeah, this is, like, I think, why the thing that one of the important distinctions between, like, toxic political ideologies as opposed to, you know, legitimate political ideologies is that the bad ones are centered on apologizing and justifying, and the good ones are focused on improving things without recourse to bringing one group down at the expense of others, even when that's perceived as being justified or correcting a prior harm. Like, because, I guess to get right into the most fucking heart of it, like the racial division that is currently being fomented in the United States. If you really want to improve race relations, you should de-emphasize race in favor of something that might actually change.
Yeah.
Because I don't think that racism comes ex nihilo. It's clearly built into our fucking DNA. That's where I agree with the people about unconscious racism. That's where I agree with them. Is
tribal bias.
Absolutely, 100%. There is tribal bias in the world, and we have to accept there's never not going to be tribal bias in the world because that's the way we are. We have 5 fingers, 2 arms, and tribal bias. And it is an inextricable part of our biology and our psychology. And so, should we try to get rid of tribal bias, or should we make life good enough that our tribal bias doesn't fuck us up because we're all just generally happy enough that we can...
What should we put at, like, the center of our focus?
Yeah, exactly.
Should the fact that we have tribal bias be at the center of the focus, or the fact that we've discovered ways of relating to each other?
Let's admit it, let's get over it, and let's work on things that let us not think about it as much.
That's right, yes.
Yeah,
let's focus on more important things, like your merit.
Can you believe how I can't believe that is controversial these days. Like how people think Martin Luther King was full of shit. Like, really? How long has it been since Martin Luther King existed? What is it? Not even half a century? Is that really enough time to just like give up on that idea and be like, well, actually no, we have to go back to segregation because clearly that dude was just a dreamer. Like, I don't know. There's an undercurrent of this kind of defeatist cynicism that I think is used as a way to apologize for reinstituting the very segregationist structures that allowed this kind of tension to be fomented. And like I said, I think it's a deliberate effort that's being doubled down on by corporate America to try to play up. And that's why you have things like the anti-Asian hate bill, the anti-black hate bill. What's next? Like the fact that you just have different bills constantly tailored towards specific ethnic groups. Like, you couldn't come up with just a general purpose law that says,
hurting people
is bad, or just why can't you just have a general purpose of saying if you fucking lynch someone and they're white, that's also bad, or they're black or Latino or Chinese or woman, gay, trans, whatever the fuck you are. Like, having organized groups that are admitting that kind of language and distinction in the world is not a healthy thing for culture. It's like you're playing with fire if you think that bringing back segregation is not going to end badly. I don't know. To me, it seems like you're really playing with fire. And I get why people want to do that, is because they've seen the way that colorblind policies have ostensibly been used as a way to paint over injustice. Exactly. But from a pragmatic perspective, at the end of the day, you go, well, on balance, despite the fact that it's possible to use colorblindness as a way to paint over injustice, it's equally, if not more, possible to use ethnic tribalism.
Yes.
Even if it's done with the best of intentions, to do the exact same thing. So, it takes you have to have a kind of pragmatic realism with that. I don't think we're ever going to get rid of tribal bias, but that's why the most important. We can integrate it in different ways though, like rivalries, sports, competition in the arts. If you want to have tribal bias, there's healthy ways of doing it.
I'm thinking also of a quote of Coleman Hughes when he was doing a kind of debate in Congress with a super SJW black guy, and Coleman was the more conservative black guy, I guess. and they were arguing about reparations for black people. And Coleman Hughes' line was, I think pursuing justice for the past will only come at the expense of justice in the present.
Wow, that's pretty fucking articulate.
And
Wow.
that was...
Well, what does it even mean to pursue? I mean, I would, just to play devil's advocate, I think people who were advocating for reparations would say that they are pursuing justice for the present, as like a rebuttal to that.
Well, the only way to provide them with money, if that's what they're asking for, is to rob it from someone who has money against their will. Because where's that money going to come from for those reparations?
Yeah, it's like, is that going to create resentment that is going to further degrade everyone's ability to live in a good society?
Well, if the rights of an individual have to be violated to appease the requests of a group, then you don't have a free nation anymore. That's to use Ayn Rand's words, that's a cannibalistic culture that demands a sacrificial animal for people to be helped.
And this sacrifice thing goes deep.
I gotta go piss.
All right.
And then we can probably do one more time. Okay, say it again.
Does society depend fundamentally on the existence of taboos?
Yeah, I guess you should start.
I was thinking about this because I was thinking about a taboo is kind of something that is like a black hole that information doesn't escape. It's like something that you can talk about only from the perspective of being outside of it. So it is a role, or it is a perspective that it is socially unacceptable to speak from.
Yeah.
So, I'm thinking of the book Lolita.
Okay.
The reason that's famous is because it's the classic example of this.
He went into the taboo.
Yeah, the protagonist is a pedophile.
Yes.
The protagonist is someone who you generally are encouraged to develop empathy with, and forcing the reader to develop empathy or leading the reader to develop empathy with someone who, with a taboo perspective, is subversive. And it's unusual, and it's not commonly done. And I think the reason it's not commonly done is because people are afraid that by speaking from a perspective, they'll be ostracized. You want to stay far away from implying that you are genuinely speaking from a perspective, because it's easy to take you can have a devil's advocate. You can be like, devil's advocate. If I were, we were just talking about leftism versus whatever. And I was like, from the devil's advocate, see, because leftism isn't socially taboo.
Yeah.
It's just, whether I agree with it or not, I can take that position for the purpose of just having a discussion, and it's fine. But, if we were talking about, pedophilia, I'm not going to be like, well, devil's advocate here. What the fuck? See what I'm saying?
Okay.
You can't do that.
Okay, but is society fundamentally built around all these different taboos is the question.
I guess the more I think, last night I was thinking about it, I thought about it more today. I don't know if it is fundamentally built. I think it is incidentally built around these taboos. I don't think it has to be, but I think it currently is, in some sense, built around taboos. Because taboos are kind of like the signposts that
these taboos are built on experiences of legitimate guilt that people before us have incurred. Through experience,
Yes.
through experience, they've done things that they immediately knew to be wrong. And we are riding on the benefit of their experience because we know that's a taboo and we know not to do that. Theoretically, someone at some point had to be doing that, become conscious within the doing of it, feel the authentic guilt of basically nature telling them, don't fucking do that anymore. And so it became a taboo. And those are marks of real progress that they're taboo. We don't need to go back and try it again. We just fucking know that's wrong.
I mean, some taboos are
There's more legitimate and less legitimate taboos.
Because there's like some taboos that are rooted in actual biological systems that predate all human society, like don't fuck your family members.
Yeah.
Well, that's not a social construct. That's a biological construct. Because you're gonna have disabled children on average. And it's windy.
Cool.
If not even the camera can withstand the winds, what chance does a cigarette have? It's true. I bet that was that was probably cool in the shot.
Yeah, we'll see.
So I guess we'll find out. Yeah, so there's biologically rooted taboos that are very non-arbitrary, and then there's
more arbitrary taboos.
There's more arbitrary taboos, like in this village, the women are never allowed to go into this hut.
Yeah.
If they did, it would be a tremendous disgrace.
Yeah.
And likewise for the men, if they entered the women's hut,
right,
then they must be exiled for 7 years or something. That seems more arbitrary.
Superstitious stuff.
Yeah, so I think that every society, particularly non-globalized ones, have lots of taboos that are arbitrary like that. And I just wonder what function that plays in those societies and what taboos, if any, we have that are arbitrary in our culture.
Yeah, where I went next, immediately when you texted that, was the action of our brain during waking hours to basically censor most of the input data that we get from the electromagnetic spectrum. We only perceive like less than 1/1,000,000th of reality. So the more arbitrary taboos in our culture kind of do the same thing, to funnel and focus the great breadth of possible experience to just the handful of things that this culture wants to focus on right now.
Yeah.
And in the optimistic sense, that helps one focus and gives a person a place in their society. They know where they belong.
Like, for instance, an example being a society where property is passed down through patriarchal inheritance mechanisms would have a taboo against extramarital sex because of the fact that women who have kids with other people are now risking.
And now you don't know where the property goes.
Yeah.
That's very disruptive.
Exactly. And so that's a pretty arguable reason, like why, or like one really interesting thing that I read from David Graeber's book, Debt, the First 5,000 Years. It's kind of like a brief history of money and debt and stuff like that, was actually historically the reason why a lot of conservative cultures, most notably Islamic cultures of the ancient and modern Near East, have hijab is because it's a way of trying to protect women from being used as currency.
Okay.
Because back in the day, like thousands of years ago, there was like credit bubbles that were like the result of like a lack of liquidity in the lending pool between barons and serfs, serfs and lords. And so when there was these credit bubbles, suddenly, farmers couldn't pay back their loans with whatever they were using as currency, like silver or whatever. And so they're like, oh, you still owe us money. Okay, we're going to take your wife and daughters.
Yeah.
So that caused a cultural reaction as it kept happening to want to protect and cloister all the women and keep them secret. And that's where you get this like sultan's harems, where like it's just all the women stay in this one special place, and they, anytime they go in public, they veil their face, because I don't want to, just how like you wouldn't go around parading your bank account to everyone.
Sure.
It puts you under threat. So that's a shitty outcome for women, because they got molded into the form of a token of exchange, because that's like the very real roots of the patriarchy. Having, it comes from property inheritance, stable, established civilizations that are subject to financial volatility end up oppressing their women, because women are forced into the role of a fungible currency. So like, that's kind of a non-arbitrary taboo at the time it developed, but now in the modern world, where there's
law,
vastly more political protections exactly for women compared to what it used to be, it's like a obsolete taboo.
Yeah.
But you have tremendous cultural momentum to where, like, in Saudi Arabia, like, oh, women, you got to cover your face in public, otherwise you'll get fucking fined or whatever. And so, like, so it's obviously like what it's just society has changed in some ways and not in others, and that tension and the dysfunction results from a failure to adapt. So I think that taboos are kind of like signposts to where society needs to integrate things in order to continue to evolve. So
sometimes
we should examine taboos and figure out what they're based on to decide whether or not they should be challenged. And things like pedophilia, we understand that is rooted in the idea of protecting children, and society obviously hasn't outgrown the need to protect children, so that's a good taboo. But like, protecting adult women, do we really need to do that? Or is it just limiting women? And because I've talked to one of my friends in Finland, he was a Muslim, comes from a Muslim family, and that's what he explained to me, was that people in Muslim countries don't understand the criticism that they receive from Western countries, because from their perspective, they're protecting their women. And why wouldn't you want to protect your women? Mm-hmm. And Western people don't understand why they insist on protecting their women. Why would you want to limit your women? Mm-hmm. And so, because we have this idea of a liberated woman, they have this idea of the woman that needs to be protected. And it's just because of different the historical, the way society was structured historically has taken a different course in the West, where you had markets which provided opportunity to both sexes. Mm-hmm. And women could gain money and power and influence by starting a business in a way that they couldn't in societies where they were relegated to the harem and couldn't drive on their own or do business or own property or anything like that. So it's just fascinating to me how much more understanding there might be in politics if we examined where these ideas come from, because it's like surprisingly impersonal, the circumstances that lead to these extremely personal feelings. Yeah. Like whether or not a hijab is a good or a bad thing, depending on where you are in the world.
Yeah, I'm loosely considering what taboos we're ensconced in at the moment. It used to be a taboo to have long hair if you were a dude.
Where'd that come from? Where I think that came from, actually? now that I recall, I think that it is a result of World War I. That prior to World War I was the first time that there was a military draft, aside from the Civil War. It was the first time that there was a large-scale conscription of men and a strong social pressure put on men to join the army and go liberate Europe. And so it required a kind of social shaming, and one of the primary social signals to determine whether or not a man was doing his duty to join the war effort and go die in the trenches or not was whether or not he had signed up for the military and gotten a haircut. Because part of the uniform of a military is that you get a buzz cut. So you could use that as a quick way to identify which of these were the goodies and the baddies.
Yeah.
And so that meme of being anti-war was resurrected and immortalized by the hippie generation, which embraced the idea of long hair as anti-war, but the reason it has anything to do with being anti-war is because of World War I.
Sure.
And prior to that, many men, even men in the army, had long hair. Even like, that's why like, I think some films that are more historically accurate that show like wars in like the 19th century where it was like army units like deployed out to the west to like murder Indians or whatever the fuck they were doing, they all had long hair. They were like riding on horsebacks, they had their blue jackets, and they had like long ponytails, and they were like in the army. Like,
yeah, I'm thinking of the Patriot.
Yeah, the Patriot, exactly.
The Revolutionary War, a lot of ponytails.
Yeah, ponytails were a big thing. And so, yeah, that's kind of like the somewhat recent historical past that's given us that. And now, of course, the hippies sort of prevailed in a way, and
more or less.
It's no longer controversial to be anti-war.
Or to have long hair.
Yeah, right. But I think that if being anti-war was still controversial, it would still be controversial to have long hair.
I'm not sure what else. Like, there's a boomer taboo against psychedelics where that podcast I was talking to you about last week between Jordan Peterson and Roland Griffiths, they were both observing the taboo around psychedelics.
That's a great example.
By neither of them at any point inhabiting the perspective of having a psychedelic trip. They were only allowing themselves to talk about it from the outside. And that's definitely a generation-specific taboo that does not apply to anyone younger than them. There's, depending on how woke of a circle you're rolling with, there's a taboo against being white and having dreadlocks. It is something I got reminded of very recently for the first time in a long time.
Because it's seen as an appropriation of black culture?
Yeah. I'm somehow, to that person's mind, I'm somehow being actively part of an oppressive racist system by doing something that only belongs to black people. So that's a taboo to some people.
Really? Isn't there like a bunch of like festival wooks though that have dreadlocks? Like, I can't imagine that's a universally believed idea. Like,
it's a more niche woke thing.
But I feel like not even all woke people think that. I've seen.
It's a niche within woke people.
Because I mean, I guess it all comes down to you whether or not you, first of all, think the dreadlocks are exclusively a black thing.
They aren't.
I think historically, maybe in American history, they've been associated with black people, but from a global perspective, I don't know if that's true.
No, there's like Nordic peoples that dread it up historically.
Oh, really? Mm-hmm. That's pretty fucking metal.
Yeah, sick as fuck.
Makes sense. It's an appropriate choice of hairstyle for you.
What else? What are some other taboos that maybe are more arbitrary? that we're in right now. They're apparently invisible.
Well, Alan Watts literally has a book entitled "A Taboo Against Knowing Who You Are," and he's writing from the perspective. He was, I think, written in the '60s, but his contention is that one of the taboos of Western society is that you're not allowed to say that you're God.
Yeah, Ayn Rand says the same thing, too. That there's a taboo against saying you're important, saying that you're of the utmost importance, actually.
Yeah, Alan Watts says this, like, he goes, what they did with Jesus is that Jesus was saying, I am a son of God, to mean...
It's a very taboo thing to say.
But everyone took him to mean, I am the son of God, particularly the Romans, because having everyone be a son of God is pretty fucking subversive. Having one dude be the son of God is pretty fucking convenient, because then you just put him on top of the thing.
Yeah.
In that plaster cast, and you make the crucifix, and then everyone's still following your system.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we've kind of... So to this day, obviously, since, we don't believe in religion anymore, guys, like, we're all over that, like, our new version of the same Christian Protestant, not even Protestant, older than Protestantism, the same OG Roman Catholic perspective that, like, you can never attain the perfection of Christ, and you need to supplicate yourself and just come to terms with your ultimate and fundamental fatal inadequacy. If you go against that now, the new version of rejecting that, like, if you were rejecting that in the common era, like in the current present time, is basically saying that, is basically going, no, I'm not responsible for the sins of my forefathers.
Yeah.
If you're not allowed to say that. If you're someone this day who goes, this is like the privilege thing, going, I don't agree with all that shit, and I don't approve of it, and I'm not going to do that. That's not me. I'm going to live my life the way according to my values. It's a distraction, and is weakening me, and is bringing us all down to not look to the future. Like that's the original thing. I think it's still, to this day, it's a taboo. It's just like...
Yes, we've literally associated it with Satan himself.
Yeah, it would be like, 100 years ago or something, if you were to go into your Sunday sermon and go like, oh, preacher, I'm not a bad person. I don't think I've really sinned grievously in my life. In fact, I'm a pretty good guy. Okay, I don't really want to, I'm not gonna take your cracker.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna go, I'm gonna leave. And then people would fucking jump on you for that.
Yeah.
They'd be like, stop.
Yeah, that's the devil speaking
Stop
through
calling
you.
us all out, motherfucker. It would be like, you have pride.
Yep.
You have hubris. You have, so the fact that you feel healthy means that you are a bad person? All right. Much more convenient to have everyone feeling bad about themselves so that this one dude can sell them the solution.
Right.
Every fucking week, where you come and you pay penance, and it's like a guilt economy.
Yeah, it's slave thought.
Yeah.
So a way to keep a slave population in line is making sure it's taboo to put yourself at the center of your experience.
Yeah, I think that's why, like, this kind of thing is really destructive towards the effort to eliminate white supremacy. Because what is the white supremacist's the best gift you could ever give them is by promulgating the idea that everyone's a white supremacist. Because now they're in great company. See, if you all accept that you're white supremacists, then that's going to make white supremacy, that's going to solve white supremacy, because, what's going to happen is it waters down the definition of white supremacy to the point that we lose the ability to identify actual white supremacy. Like, I don't know. I guess it's just that's where the erosion of language is kind of dangerous, is that you need to have, like, see, because back in the day, it's not like it's obvious what white supremacy really is, because there was eras of history where you had, like, majorities of white people going like, yeah, it makes total sense that black people have 3/5 of a vote. That was the democratic consensus. From our perspective, and you see, because if it was obvious to them back then that was white supremacy and that was bad, then by definition in democratic society, it wouldn't have had that policy. Now we don't, because we realized, that's white supremacy.
Right.
Having unequal political representation based on your race is white supremacy. Okay, white dude with dreadlocks is not fucking white supremacy. If you're gonna create a world where white dude with dreadlocks is white supremacy, and you're using the same word to describe white dude with dreadlocks as
a
3/5 of a vote, or a Nazi tattoo, or then you're like, well, it just means you're gonna have to invent new words to talk about the things that you watered down.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. It's like, you're just creating more work for yourself, I think, when you do that, and you're disrupting the cultural consensus that settled on a truth, and you're muddling it with, like, I don't know, maybe that's inevitable.
No, I don't think it's inevitable. I think we've made so much progress in terms of goodwill towards men, and things like critical race theory are taking that progress and actively pushing it backward in a very bad way that is not necessary and needs to be called out to whatever ability one is able to call it out. We found one of the best articulations possible for the ideal to work towards, and that's MLK. I have a dream that I'll be judged based on my merit and the content of my character.
Yeah.
More than anything else. And we've worked towards that as a society for a few decades now, and the work's not done. We still gotta keep working towards that, but apparently now we have to defend against self-proclaimed leftists that are attacking that structure now.
Like, the thing about MLK is, even though he was a black man, he was not speaking from the perspective of a black man.
Yeah, he was speaking from the perspective of an individual, a human being.
Exactly.
Yes.
And that's what's problematic, to use a much overused word these days, is that you're not allowed to speak from the perspective of a human being. You're expected to speak from the perspective of your racial group, which is bullshit.
It's terrible.
Yeah, I think it's terrible, and it's like, it just goes against that idea that, like, whatever happened to this idea that, like, we have a lot more in common than we have different from each other. Like, isn't that the core idea of, like, actual anti-racism? That,
uniting based on our commonalities.
Yeah, or just realizing that 99.9% of your humanity is shared. Like, there's, like, the bottom of the well is so deep that we don't even know where the bottom of the well is with our humanity.
Our shared humanity.
Yeah, we haven't even, as individuals, we're still in the surface levels. There's a few individuals who've managed to go deep within themselves and find out who they really are. There's a lot more that haven't, and society as a whole would be better served if more people got deeper within themselves, because the more depth you have within yourself, the more you come to appreciate that you share that depth with other people.
Yes.
The way to divide people is to make everyone stay in the shallow, literally skin deep level analysis, to where no compromise can be found, because if you're only focusing on the coat of paint, you're not going to realize you're the same goddamn car. You're going to be like, oh, I'm red, I'm blue. Well, you're all metal. Or flesh and blood, I guess, to make it human. But I'm just thinking of cars because of like painting them different colors. Like, I don't know. And I think when you really sit down to talk about this is like really fucking obvious. But it's crazy how...
It's obvious to you and me, but you'll come to a salon and there'll be some leftists there, and you'll have a chance to be confronted with...
I don't know if they're really leftists. I don't think this is a left idea at all. When did this become left? How is this even an economic... This is not an economic ideology. This is psychotherapy. This is racism, sexism, and various other cultural points of contention forced into the mold of the only kind of political discourse we know how to do, which is class struggle shit. But it's just like trying to... you can't just swap out the contents and keep the same structure. It doesn't make sense.
Well, I look forward to hearing you say that to someone who's calling themselves a leftist.
I know. Here's the thing. I know how to have conversations with people in ways that doesn't piss them off. It's not that hard, really. All you have to do is periodically appreciate the fact that you believe that have something legitimate to say, and it's amazing how much agreement you can find with people when you do that.
Totally.
I try to resist becoming polarized as much as I can, and I think because that's like I don't know. It's amazing how people.
I think that's great, but I think there's a risk there too of not calling out things that are straight up wrong. Because some things get said that are just wrong, and out of respect between individuals, you keep quiet about things that you find to be wrong that get said. And so the most important things to explore and discuss go unexplored and undiscussed, because you go to something that is like more common ground, or there could be more like actual progress of thought if you can talk about these things impersonally or objectively. Like, I just say I disagree with that. Here's why. I don't then interrupt them when they rebuttal, but I certainly am going to say that's wrong. I personally am not willing to I don't know, because in a salon type situation, it's all about the flow and the momentum.
Yeah.
So I will let all manner of personal opinions of mine go unspoken if I can help just keep the flow going.
Yeah.
So that's the contrast there.
Yeah, because in the salon thing, you are kind of working towards a meta art piece thing where it's the situation, it's
it's everyone getting to express their worldviews.
It's that environment. That's a beautiful thing in its own right. A very rare and beautiful thing, and it's worth choosing your battles.
Yeah.
Choosing your battles does not amount to censorship. Always doesn't necessarily amount to it. It's the reasons. It's the reasons why you choose to do so.
Should we call it?
Yeah, let's do it.
Cool.
That was a conclusive note to end on.